welcome to this roundtable. We have some very special guests. I'll have them introduce themselves. My name is Nadia McConnell. I'm president of the U.S. Ukraine Foundation. I think we all know that the whole issue of Crimea is one of the most important parts of any discussion regarding Ukraine. Always has been, and certainly today as well. But I will let our guests talk about it. They've come to Washington, but they've just been to New York and had several meetings, so I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves first, and then talk about the various organizations that they represent, and then their impressions of what the meetings they had in New York, and then what they hope to achieve here. So, Maria, I guess maybe I should start with you.
Yeah, thank you, Nadia, for having all of us. My name is Maria Kurina. I'm head of advocacy in Human Rights Center Crimea. I'm former diplomat, and I represent this wonderful 4 organizations that founded Human Rights House Crimea. Human Rights House Crimea is a part of Human Rights House Foundation network. It's 18 organizations, human rights organizations in Europe in 11 countries. We stand for liberated Crimea. We document war crimes and human rights violations since the occupations of Crimea in 2014. And the majority of organizations they present them themselves are displaced organizations from Crimea.
Hello, my name is Olga. I'm originally from Crimea, but here I represent an organization which is called Human Rights Center Zmina. The Human Rights Center who works with the documentation of war crimes and crimes against humanity, and after the beginning of the full-scale invasion, together with our colleagues, we started a coalition of organizations which is called Ukraine 5 AM, and our focus in documentation of war crimes, and also we're doing the advocacy job. And I work with national authorities in order to be sure that they take into account during the establishing of national policy, that they assure that right of those who have been affected by the conflict is taken into account by the government. And we also work on next steps after the occupation of Crimea and other occupied territories. So we try to elaborate the steps, the list of first priority steps of these, of what national authorities should do after the occupation of Crimea.
I am Olga Skrypnyk. I represent the Crimea Human Rights Group. We have been documented human rights violations and war crimes since 2014. Originally, I am from Crimea too, from a very small and beautiful city, Yalta. But in 2014, Russian soldiers occupied my home, and I was forced to leave my home, Crimea, and also my colleagues from Crimea. So our team consists of Crimean human rights defenders and Crimean journalists, and our public office based in Kyiv, but we have network of domestic monitors in Crimea who help collect evidence in field, Crimeans who want that the world know about human rights violations, large-scale human rights violations. So we work with several issues. First of all, political prisoners, because Russia prosecutes Crimean Tatar defenders, Crimean Tatar activists, Ukrainian activists, and now we have like new trend when after full-scale invasion, Russian soldiers abduct Ukrainian activists in newly occupied territories like Kherson or the Zaporizhia region. It's southern part of Ukraine, and after that transferred to Crimea, to unfreedom place. And for us, very important to discuss on UN level, on political level, diplomatic level, how we can release these people, how we can return these people to Ukraine. And also we work with issue of militarization of civilian population and children in Crimea. And unfortunately, my home, my Crimea, now is one of the key military bases of this full invasion against Ukraine. But also, Crimea is like big prison for Ukrainians who against this war, who support Ukraine. And so it's for us very important to talk about it, to keep Crimea on international agenda and to find solutions for this, how we can reintegrate, how we can release people, how we can protect them. But of course, our main condition, we understand, Crimea must be deoccupied for human rights protection. We have no another mechanism. We need deoccupation.
So my name is Maria. I'm the head of the Center of Civil Education Almanda. Our organization was established in Yalta in 2011, and back then we were worked mainly with youth and children on promoting non-discrimination, tolerance, media literacy, and we were working on building strong, proactive society in Crimea. And honestly, it was quite successful because we were the one who organized Euromaidan in Yalta, and we also were the one who organized pro-Ukrainian actions at the beginning of the occupation. And this is mainly why most of us had to leave Crimea during the first months of the occupation because of the direct threats to the co-founders of our organization and to the members of our organization. And since 2014, we are working on protections rights of children who are staying in occupation. We are working on protecting their right to education and helping children to enter Ukrainian universities from occupied Crimea and helping them with reintegration to Ukrainian society, because as longer time passed, as harder the reintegration processes are. We're also working on documenting what is happening with children who are staying in occupation. And unfortunately now we had to talk that in Crimea and in the occupied territories there is a whole system of destroying Ukrainian identity of children and youth who are living there. And this system covers indoctrination, militarization. This also includes propaganda of war and propaganda of serving in the armed forces of the Russian Federation. And the system which was built and tested in Crimea is the one amplified in the newly occupied territories. So we see these total links that what was being done in Crimea and didn't get any response, real response, is now being done in the newly occupied territories, and more children are now under such system, and we are now talking about more than 1 million children. So our main aim is to protect these children, is to put pressure on persons who are involved in this system, including sanctions pressure, and to work as hard as possible to deoccupy these territories, because after that will be the hard process of reintegration of these children, and this is our Ukrainian children whom we have to protect and who we have to liberate. This is why the Crimea and the other occupied territories is not an issue about territories. This is issue about our people. And this is also an issue about our future, because children, they are future of Ukraine, and their identity, which is now being destroyed, this is destruction of Ukrainian identity and the future of Ukraine as it is.
Thank you very much.
First of all, thank you for having us here. My name is Katerina Rashevska, and I am a legal expert at the Regional Center for Human Rights. Our organization was established in Sebastopol in 2013, but since the beginning of the occupation we were forced to move to Kyiv because of the fear of prosecution. And in Kyiv we were focusing especially on the issues related to the occupation of the Crimean Peninsula. Our distinguished feature is that we are an organization of professional lawyers. That is why we assisting victims in the process of gaining justice during all these first 8 years before the large-scale invasion. We prepared and submitted more than 100 complaints to the European Court of Human Rights and also to the United Nations Human Rights Committee. We were cooperating very closely with the ICC. We submitted 14 communications related to different war crimes and crimes against humanity. Started from the protection of cultural heritage to human shields, to violations against property rights and so on. But after the large-scale invasion, we understood that it was impossible to be only the so-called Crimean organization. So we expanded the focus of our activities, and now in the heart of our work is protection of children who were illegally deported and forcibly transferred to the territory under the Russian control. We are elaborating mechanisms in order to repatriate them, in order to rehabilitate them and reintegrate into Ukrainian society. And also we are dealing with many other issues, many other challenges. For example, we are preparing proposals for sanction lists, or we are trying to implement victim-centric approach to the transitional justice processes. So we are trying to do our best in order to cover the vulnerable groups of civilians, and that is why we are here. We are here to speak up for our people, to speak up for our children.
Well, thank you so much. The work you're doing is just incredibly important and timely. In January, the foundation launched an informational advocacy campaign on the issue of kidnapped children, because it just was not getting any attention. Of course, we know there's so many things going on, and so we've done a series of webinars. Fortunately, there are some things that have taken place, like the Yale report, I think, was very helpful. There have been sessions at the UN, so all of these things, right? And then some of the reporters who have been doing stories about these kidnapped children. But we found that even going out, we go out to different states and cities to talk, that who are people who are interested about the war, when mentioning the whole issue of kidnapped children, many people were shocked, didn't know about it, and still don't. And so that was part of the reason we launched this campaign. And then in April, we held a roundtable. It was our first effort to begin building a coalition of organizations that are engaged in this issue. And the strategy is to identify what I targeted 4 policy centers. Let's say Washington, the UN, the EU, and of course going into Ukraine. And each of those presents unique challenges and opportunities. So the idea is to gather people who are working with these various centers to get their counsel, but also to bring together the expertise. And there are organizations that are also creating sanctions lists, and I think so. I'm very happy to meet you and get to know of this incredible work that you're doing. So one of the centers is, of course, the UN, and frankly, we know that it is very difficult to get these international organizations to move on certain issues. We all understand what the reason is. So you've just come from New York, you've spent some time and had some meetings. So it'd be very interesting to hear what you heard, what your perspective was, and do you see opportunities for making progress on some of these issues? If you want to share like some of the meetings that you had.
Yeah. Well, first of all, our aim was, as you said, to bring the light on this issue, because with a full-scale invasion and those scale of atrocities that had been happening in Ukraine, the human rights violations in Crimea were overshadowed, and the topic of child deportation as well, where Crimea takes part in this, and it's a big role. So we tried to do more outreach than usually. We tried to meet not only with those, our partners, which are standing with us for years, since the independence and since full-scale invasion. We tried to establish connections with broader audience and with broader member states representations, and we tried to convey as many as possible the facts that we have. We also had the event for member states on child deportation on the 1st of June, which is in Ukraine and in Eastern Europe, in many countries, is a day of protection of the children. Unfortunately, the night on the 1st of June, Kiev was heavily attacked, not only Kiev. One child died in Kiev, and mom of a child also, of another child, and it was very cynical greeting from the aggressor state. So we didn't sleep even the day before we had to advocate. And I think my colleagues can share more details. For example, I think, Katya, you have something to say about more legal aspect of our...
Yes, I can start, and I'm sure that your colleagues can add something also very important. So I was in New York as representative of my organization with a clear call to adopt a resolution, and I presented the draft resolution on the repatriation of Ukrainian children. This is very politically neutral resolution, so-called humanitarian resolution, without any mentions of Maria Lvova Belova, Putin, accountability issues, ICC warrants, arrest warrants, and so on. Because first of all, we need repatriation of our children, maybe before this identification of them, but we have started already this process at the national level. And after this, we can talk about accountability, about justice, and fair compensation. So I presented the text of this resolution for interested parties. For some of them, I sent a print copy because they were interested to work on this. And I can tell that even representatives of some countries who maybe are not so decisive when we are talking about Crimean issue, because they told that this is like political question and repatriation of children humanitarian one. So they don't support now, but they are interested to support in future. And as you know, we lack the time in order to think about repatriation in future, because some children are in very vulnerable position. For example, boys aged of 16, 17 years old, because they are now recognized as Russian citizens, and they have not rights but duty. And one of this duty is to serve in the Russian army. So these children will be transferred to the battlefield as a cannot fodder in future. So we cannot wait 1 year or 2 years. And I'm sure that you know that according to international standards, when children are in a foreign country during more than 2 years, it can be not in their best interest to be returned. So we should avoid this situation. We should fight for our children and to demonstrate to the whole international community that we were trying and we would like to repatriate them. It was my call, and I guess that maybe even in 2023 we can push such a resolution, because it is not some unique document only for Ukraine. It was in previous history of the United Nations. They had such a resolution for Greece children, for Rwanda children, for children from Mozambique and Liberia. Why our children are worse?
I want to say that we also support the tribunal resolution, because we know that right now it's on the hold, and we also send a clear message that accountability is not something that can wait, because we see in here and also I believe just in the day before we came, President Macron also said that tribunal can wait it, but now it's a point about negotiations. But in Ukraine we clearly understand that Ukrainian legal system can't just deal with all those cases. Right now it more than 90,000 war crimes which have been documented by the OPG, Office of the General Prosecutor Office. And we understand that it's not the end of the war. We are in the middle of the war, and also we have occupied territory. So that's why the number of war crimes will be raised, and we need support, but not just support of our internal system, legal system, but also the support on the international level. We clearly understand that ICC will take several cases, but not the whole. And also we need to punish for aggression, because aggression as a mother of crimes, and it's the source of all those war crimes and crimes against humanity. Without aggression, we won't be able to speak about 90,000 war crimes. So that's why with the missions, we also speak about this tribunal resolution, and we receive message that it's, right now it's really political question and it will decide on the capitals, and probably so there are some clear reasons why not now, but we hope that sometime, someday, and in nearest future, this tribunal resolution can be adopted.
Yeah. And also in New York we advocate several new points to human rights situation in Crimea resolution of General Assembly. Usually every year we propose some new points to this resolution. This year, for example, one of these points should be about civilians who were abducted in newly occupied territories like Kherson and Zaporizhia region and were transferred to occupied Crimea and now are prosecuted under fabricated criminal cases by FSB. And also we are sure that it's a human rights issue. All these people are tortured twice. First time when they were abducted in newly occupied territories by Russian soldiers or by Russian FSB in these newly occupied territories. And second time when they were transferred to detention center in Crimea, they were tortured by FSB for fabricating these criminal cases. And we think that if this point will be included in new draft resolution this year, it can be helped to find mechanism to release these people. Right?
Yeah, I think in general what was really important for us is to talk that Crimea should still be an important issue and it couldn't be a point of negotiation at all, because all of what we are talking about people, and we are talking about human rights and protection of our people there, and even talking about children. There was much more interest about deported children, but not interest about children who are staying in occupation. And this is a huge problem, really, because children who are staying in occupation, they goes through the same militarization, same indoctrination, and for 9 years, a lot of them are not children anymore. And a lot of them was already illegally conscripted and sent to the battlefield against Ukraine. And what was also quite sad for me personally is on the day when Russia was bombing Ukraine, on the 1st of June, when it was the Child Protection Day, we had an event in UN, but at the same day in Artek, in the camp in Crimea, there was a special event for children from the Zaporizhia region who was brought to that camp in Crimea, and during this event, for them was reading letters from Russian soldiers, and they was asked to have a special action for supporting Russian soldiers. So this is the process which is going on, and this is how Russia works. It tries to destroy everything Ukrainian and try to engage our children in occupied territories to support Russians. And this is also our children. This is why for us it was really important to bring light on this situation and to make this clear point that this is never will be an issue about territories. This always will be an issue about people.
And can I just add, because in this context, the meeting with representatives of Mexico was really, really important, because as you know, in September, in General Assembly, they will present their peace plan for Ukraine, and one of points is the territorial concession. And this territorial concession is Crimean Peninsula. So we would like to highlight that Ukrainian civic society, and I guess I can tell it, I can highlight it, we didn't support in this during this meeting, and now we are not supporting, and in future we will not support again this territorial concession and Crimea as some instrument in order to gain peace, because there is no peace without Crimea, in Ukrainian Crimea, and there is no justice without Crimea. There is no even international legal order without Crimea, because such a territorial concession, this is violation of the United Nations Charter. So.
And I think we all represented not our personal voices at that meeting, but the voices of Ukrainians who are silenced. Thousands of them are silenced in the occupied territories and in Crimea as well. And also I think important to say that some delegations, they haven't heard that Crimea are occupied for 9 years ongoing, and that was important to bring to the table. And we started the campaign on one of our citizen journalists, because as you all know, there is no freedom of speech, no freedom of expression in Crimea for all these years consistently. So regular citizens, Ukrainians and Crimean Tatars, started to do citizen journalism. What is that? They started to do streams of illegal searches, early warnings in their houses. They started to do streaming of so-called court hearings. And one of our citizen journalist contact, Irina Danilovich, exactly last May, was kidnapped. She was held incommunicado, so nobody was informed if she was alive at that moment. I was in Brussels advocating, and I didn't know what to say if she is alive when diplomats were asking me. She's a young woman, Ukrainian, who was covering the situation and the truth, bringing the truth to the world about crackdown on human rights in Crimea. She was, later we found out when we did this public outcry, which is very helpful, that she was held in FSB, the special security building basement. She was tortured there, there was ill treatment, she was threatened to death and humiliated. She was forced to sign some blank papers with no materials on that, and then after that the law enforcement said and accused her in terrorism, which is absolutely politically motivated case. She was sentenced to 7 years in prison. Now that it's appeal in court, but the main point is that Irina is nurse professionally. She almost lost her hearing. She doesn't hear anymore. She has severe headaches daily. She cannot even listen or read the materials for appeal, and she can be transferred very soon to the Russian Federation territory from Crimea. She is the only child of very senior parents, and we always ask, and we asked in delegations to tweet free Danilovich, because we know from previous cases when our Ukrainian political prisoners were released, they said the moment when it was publicly, especially on top level from politicians, think tanks, diplomats, they started to treat us better, at least a little bit. And we can save lives by these actions.
You mentioned June 1st. One of the things we've been discussing with some other organizations, that perhaps together we need to create a strategic calendar of key dates where there could be certain actions planned globally, right? And so actually when I asked our staff to find out about children's dates, and so yeah, June 1 was one, there's I think another one in a couple of weeks, but then in September is UNICEF Children's Day. So one of the things that we talked about at the round table was my hope was to maybe organize a summit. We did that in 2015. That was also, everybody's always talking about sort of the geopolitical, geography of the war and all of that. And even then, I felt that there was not enough attention on humanitarian issues. And so we organized a summit here, and we had over 400 people come in the Capitol auditorium, and we had a lot of organizations from across the country, we call them Maidan-born, that had sprouted up to help on the humanitarian issue. So perhaps that's something that we could think about, where, and also on some of these things, whether you're pushing sanctions lists to see if there's an ability to coordinate so that, it's very hard for, members of Congress when they get confronted with different, agendas or different priorities. So one of the things that we've organized, we call Friends of Ukraine Network, actually it's going to be 10 years old next year, where we pull together experts. We have a national security task force, which has a lot of our former U.S. ambassadors to Ukraine, like Ambassador Herbst. We have several military NATO commanders, General Breedlove and Wesley Clark, and so they've been coming together and putting out priority recommendations for assistance. And we make sure that it's bipartisan. We are reconstituting one for reconstruction and recovery. But as you've been talking, I think when we have even this, I think that there needs to be sort of a separate almost group that focuses on Crimea, right? Even on the reconstruction, recovery, because it's not just about the physical. It's about it's people, what kind of support, social services are needed, right? For the trauma, all children of Ukraine have suffered trauma, right? Be constant, living in shelters, all that. So I think this has to be interwoven in any plans for, we're calling it reimagining reconstruction and recovery for Ukraine's communities. So I think, and you've been talking about that, so I think there's a lot that we can do. So with a little bit of time that's left, this is the beginning of your time in Washington. So what, I guess you're missing is similar here, right? You, in terms of making sure that people understand what's going on, or do you have special agenda items?
No, I think it's the same. We just would like to say that when we hear it's a lot of Ukraine, it's too much Ukraine on the agenda somewhere, we would like to say, but can you say it to the children in Crimea who are living under this militarization, teaching, etc., or deported children, looking into their eyes, it's too much Ukraine for us until we have all children back to Ukraine and all territories back to Ukraine. It's not enough Ukraine.
Well, part of what we say, first of all, this issue of kidnapped children is worldwide in a way. Yes, human trafficking. So this is, I think it's important for these institutions with whom you're working, deal with these issues, because it's important not only just for Ukraine, but even in terms of with children, if you want to talk about food security, right? Children all over the world are going to suffer, especially those in Africa, right? The impact. They're already suffering. So people have to be educated a little bit and confronted with, some facts, and not be too much Ukraine. Is that so? That's what you heard, right?
Especially in the UN, which is not really true now.
Reminds me when many years ago there was this Ukraine fatigue. I used to say to some of our colleagues in government, is there any other country where you attach that adjective? What do you mean? It's like, it's, but this is also, I think, part of, we're talking about the Kremlin being successful in propaganda and disinformation, using all these various arguments to try and dampen support for Ukraine. I think you are powerful advocates, and women and mothers have done, even in Ukraine, when I started going in '90, the mothers of children of Chernobyl were a force to be reckoned with. I mean, part of the breakup of the Soviet Union was because of these various mothers of the Afghan soldiers, right? So you're the next wave of women and mothers who are going to make the world notice and address these issues. And kudos to whatever role you played. And we talked about how difficult it is to move these institutions. But the ICC decision is a huge success. Even though they stopped short of calling it genocide, right? Which it is. Yeah. But, it was a major, major accomplishment to even get what you did. So in terms of the legal, when we started our advocacy program, the first webinar we had was legal experts, including former ambassadors, Stephen Rapp, who was State Department for War Crimes. They all said it's genocide. It's clearly that. So, we just got to keep pushing that. So I'm very interested. That's the other thing we want to build, a coalition of legal experts that are dealing in these different centers. And so it seems like the work that you're doing at the EU, because if we could get, like I say, strategic calendar where we're doing certain things collectively, and everybody can have a different part of it, but if we all push on those same days, and also the idea of maybe uniting some of the our members of Congress who are very strong supporters of these issues, and to get members of the European Parliament and others, so we get these different subgroups. So again, thank you so much for coming. I am so impressed about the work that you're doing, and I believe that you're going to be successful, and we're here to help any way that we can.
Thank you so
Thank
much
you
for
for
always
us.
staying with Ukraine all these years.